All right, great. Let's jump right in. So we're going to be working on a very basic local LAN, local area network. What you see here is are a few things. The black cylinder is a T-Mobile cellular sourced router and wireless router. Um, what in lieu of getting broadband, it's just like getting your internet wired into your house, but it's doing it from a cellular connection. So actually that device has a cell phone number assigned to it, a mobile number assigned to it, and it's a 5G device. So that's going to be our router. What you see me working with there is a Cat6 Ethernet Ethernet cable. So it's a 8 wire Cat6 Ethernet cable. You'll also see in the turquoise box is an unmanaged switch with 5 ports. That it's unmanaged versus managed, so there's less features in a managed switch, like a Cisco switch. There are more customizable features that you can add that handles the spanning tree protocol and these other cool features. This one is very basic. It's almost kind of like a repeater more than anything. It's like a dumb switch they'd call it. Not I don't think it's necessarily a hub, but it's a dumb switch. It has much less features. So in the little brown box in front of the router, the rectangular shape, that's actually a USB-C to Ethernet adapter, and you'll see me using that later on. And then on the left, there's a cable tester. So what you'll see now is I'm starting the process of opening up the cable, unwinding the internal copper wires. In a Cat6 Ethernet cable, there's 8 different wires. Now when you terminate the end of the cables with an RJ45, depending on whether you use a T568A or T568B termination standard, either way you still have to open up the cable and undo the twisted pairs and arrange them in so that you can actually slip the wires into the RJ45 connector. Now there's a couple of different RJ45 connectors that you can use. I'm using what's called a pass-through connector. So the whole process is you open up the Ethernet cable. You have something called there's a little bit of a string, like a nylon string there, like a thread in there. I think it's called the ripcord. I think they call it the ripcord, that allows you to split open the Ethernet cable even more. You have to be careful, and you'll notice that I realized this when you're first opening up the outer casing. You don't want to nick the inside cables, the twisted pairs, because that'll damage. You'll notice actually when I did this the first time that I nicked the cable, and when I ran it through the cable tester, it actually came up as 2 of the internal cables were faulty. They didn't work. So I learned pretty quickly. The plier looking thing is called a crimper. It's a multi-purpose tool. It has a way of snipping the twisted pair cables, and then also a slot for you to fit in and the RJ45 connector and crimp it down, hold it in place, and also cut off the ends of the cable that are extra. It also works to crimp an RJ11, which is the connector at the ends of telephone lines, the RJ11. So let the process begin, and I'm going to go ahead and allow this to fast forward and get on with the show. Okay, what you'll notice here is that I'm having a little bit of trouble fitting in the internal copper wires through the connector, through the pass-through. It's not difficult. That's why it's very important to make sure that you straighten out as best as you could the internal wires, and also snip them long enough that it's not a pain in the butt passing them through. You want to snip them long enough that you have enough to work with to pass through the connector, but then they can't be too long because it becomes a problem trying to slip it through the connector. And what you'll notice here is I'm referencing a little help guide to determine the color scheme, whether I'm using a T568A or T568B termination standard. Now, as I understand it, the T568A is recommended when you're working kind of like enterprise, because that's more of a legacy standard, and then the 568B is a more modern standard. Okay, excellent. So we have one wire done. Now let's have a look and run it through the cable tester. Make sure everything is okay. Let me clean up the area a little bit first though. All right, here we go. So the way the cable tester works is that it actually runs it's call it a signal through each of the wires, right? There's 8 wires, 4 twisted pairs. So I don't know if you'll be able to see directly, but once you switch it on both ends, it blinks through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If there's a blinking light that hits once on each of the numbers, then it means that each wire at both ends is receiving the signal properly. If one of the if in the sequence, if one of the numbers don't blink, that means that there's something wrong with the wire. So you'll need to either troubleshoot or start over with a different connector, with different cable, different connector. So yeah. Now one of these wires is going to be for the connecting the router to the switch, and then another one is going to be connecting my laptop to the switch. Remember, the whole point of this home lab is to use what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the Wi-Fi on my laptop and source the internet signal from the Ethernet cable itself. So I need one cable from the laptop to the switch, and then another cable from the switch to the router. So we're going to run this process again. All right, great. Finishing up the second cable. Now, only thing left is to clean up my area so that I can run it through my cable tester again. All right. This one. And I just wanted to look at the ends because I think it's really cool. Really cool that all of the world's internet, for the most part, if you're not using fiber optic, typically you're using copper wire. Incredible what actually passes through the copper wire and runs our modern world. So as you can see, I'm checking it out, turned it on, and each one of the lights is blinking, showing a working copper wire, Ethernet copper wire, Cat6 cable. Excellent. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to power on my router. I'm going to connect the router to the switch, and then I'm going to connect the switch to my USB-C to Ethernet adapter, and that's going to go into my laptop. And then I'm going to shut off the Wi-Fi on my laptop and run the internet from the USB-C adapter on my laptop. All right, so let's open up the unmanaged switch box, product of TP-Link. I think it cost me like 25 bucks. So it's amazing technology these days, hardware these days. If you looking to make a home lab, you don't need to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars just to get a basic home lab going. You can be a little bit more, let's say, professional and find a more enterprise grade switch on eBay, which I plan to do. But just to get my feet wet, I think this is a really great choice. So again, I'm going to connect the router to the switch and then the switch to the laptop and run the internet. So let's do it. Okay, great. So now that all the connections are made, I'm going to turn off the Wi-Fi and I'm going to launch Wireshark, which is a network traffic analyzer. And I'm going to start capturing network traffic, network packets from the USB-C network interface card, from the USB-C port. Okay, great. So now that we have some traffic coming in, I'm going to scroll all the way to the top and show you the broadcast messages that are going across all 5 ports. The address resolution protocol, the ARP requests. So what the ARP requests are basically messages sent by a device on a local network to discover the MAC address associated with a given IP address. So basically what this is telling me is that the switch is connected and it's sending out a broadcast to figure out, and now the devices now recognize that they're on a network, and the MAC addresses have to be discovered, because as we'll discuss in later videos, the IP address gets you to the front door. Then say the front door of an apartment building. The MAC address actually gets the packet to its final destination, the device. So the ARP request does that MAC address discovery process. So this tells me that the switch is connected, and we're going to discover a little bit more about this. Okay, great. And so as you can see here is that the ARP request is the source of the ARP request is coming from that TP-Link switch. So that's what I'm pointing out here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to jump down to the packets detail pane, which basically is a mirror of the OSI layers, the OSI model layers. So the first one being layer 1, which is the bits, the physical layer. Layer 2, which is the data link. We're going to look at the data link layer because that's a layer that actually interests me, because what I want to point out here is the information that's coming in from layer 2, which is the switch layer, and layer 3 is has to do with, so layer 2 is relating to MAC address, switch layer, internal network information details. Layer 3 has to do with the routing and more IP related details. What I want to point out here is at the layer 2 link, we see that source of the Ethernet communication coming from a SageMon broadcast device with this MAC address. And so what I want to show you is I want to go and show you that, kind of prove that is actually the wireless router, or let's just say the router. That is the router that I'm using. So if I go online and I check my account, I get the name of the device and I Google it, indeed it's called the SageMon Fast 568B. Interesting, gateway. So 568B is the termination standard. Awesome, and that's exactly the standard I used to terminate mine, so happy coincidence. And what I'm checking here is the MAC address that is displayed on the back of the device matches the MAC address coming in through the packet analyzer, through Wireshark. So let's see if I can get it close enough for you to see. And that's the MAC address of the router. And let me find the MAC address on the packet sniffer, packet analyzer. And sure enough, there it is. And you have to take my word for it that that MAC address matches the MAC address on the device. Okay, great. And so that concludes this recordingless lab video where we created a local LAN with where we worked. We created our own Ethernet cables, 2 of them, terminating them with the 568B termination standard, and we used those 2 cables to create a a very local LAN, a very small LAN, local area network, connecting a router to a switch to a laptop, and we analyzed the traffic coming into the USB-C port using Wireshark. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.